The inheritance. Marcus Chen adjusted his prosthetic leg as he climbed the steps to the old Victorian house on Maple Street. The lawyer's letter, crumpled in his sweaty palm, felt heavier than the combat gear he used to carry through the mountains of Afghanistan. His great-aunt Millicent, whom he'd met exactly twice in his 32 years, had somehow left him everything she owned. The key turned easily in the weathered oak door, and Marcus stepped into a world that smelled of lavender and old books. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through lace curtains. The house was exactly what he'd expected from an eccentric old woman who claimed to be a xenobiologist, whatever that meant. Shelves lined every wall, packed with strange artifacts, crystalline formations, and books with titles in languages he couldn't identify. A telescope pointed toward the ceiling through a custom-cut skylight. Star charts covered one entire wall, marked with annotations in Millicent's spidery handwriting. Marcus limped through the cluttered living room, his cane tapping against the hardwood floors. The lawyer had mentioned something about special care instructions for a pet, but he hadn't seen any cat or dog food in the kitchen. Maybe she'd had fish or something equally low maintenance. The basement door stood slightly ajar, and a strange blue glow emanated from below. Marcus hesitated. In his experience, mysterious glowing basements rarely contained anything good, but the lawyer had been insistent about checking on Zephyr, probably some exotic lizard or snake that rich old ladies like to keep. The wooden steps creaked under his weight as he descended. The blue light grew stronger, and he caught the scent of something metallic and sharp, like ozone after lightning. At the bottom of the stairs, Marcus froze. In the center of the basement, inside what looked like a high-tech containment field crackling with energy, lay a dragon. Not a lizard, not an iguana. A honest-to-God dragon, about the size of a large horse, with scales that shifted from deep purple to midnight black in the pulsing light. Its wings were folded against its serpentine body, and its massive head rested on clawed forepaws. The creature's eyes were closed, its chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. Marcus rubbed his eyes, certain that the pain medication was causing hallucinations. But when he looked again, the dragon was still there. Very real and very much alive. "What the hell did you get yourself into, Aunt Millicent?" he whispered. The dragon's eyes snapped open. They were an impossible shade of gold, with pupils that dilated as they focused on Marcus. Intelligence gleamed in those ancient-looking orbs, and Marcus felt like he was being examined and catalogued by something far older and wiser than himself. "Finally," the dragon said in a voice like distant thunder, "someone with sense shows up." Marcus stumbled backward, his cane clattering to the floor. "You can talk." Remarkable deduction. The dragon's voice carried a distinctly British accent, crisp and formal. "Yes, I can speak your language. Among others, your species isn't particularly challenging to understand, linguistically speaking." "My species?" Marcus retrieved his cane, using it to steady himself. "You're not from Earth." Another brilliant observation. "No, I am not from your little blue marble. I am Zephyr Thakmorden of the 7th Imperial Fleet, House of the Crimson Dawn." The dragon's head tilted, studying Marcus with unsettling intensity. "Though I suppose that means nothing to you." Marcus's military training kicked in, suppressing his panic and replacing it with tactical assessment. The containment field looked sophisticated, definitely beyond current human technology. The dragon seemed calm, even bored, which suggested it had been here for a while. "How long have you been in my aunt's basement?" 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Not that I'm counting." Zephyr's voice carried a note of bitter amusement. "Your aunt was persistent in her research." "Research into what?" "Into me, obviously. Xenobiology, she called it. The study of alien life forms." Zephyr shifted slightly, and Marcus noticed heavy metal bands around the dragon's legs and neck. She was trying to prove that your species could coexist peacefully with others. Naive but admirable in its own way. Marcus moved closer to the containment field, noting the complex control panel mounted on the wall. Readouts in multiple languages scrolled across monitors, and warning lights blinked steadily. Why are you restrained? Because your aunt, for all her good intentions, was terrified of what I represented. Zephyr's eyes narrowed. I am what your kind would call a war criminal. The last survivor of a failed invasion force that your planet's defenders destroyed quite thoroughly. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Invasion force? Oh, yes. We came to claim Earth for the Empire 3 years ago. 50 ships, 10,000 warriors, enough firepower to crack your planet's crust. Zephyr's voice remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. We lasted approximately 6 hours against your defense forces. Marcus felt his knees go weak. Earth has defense forces? Had. Your species has a remarkable talent for violence, but you're also surprisingly fragile. The war ended badly for everyone involved. Zephyr paused, something almost like sadness flickering across his reptilian features. I was shot down over this continent, the sole survivor of my ship. Your aunt found me dying in a crater and chose to heal rather than kill. The basement felt suddenly stifling. Marcus had spent 4 tours in Afghanistan, had seen the worst humanity could do to itself. But the idea of an alien invasion fought and won while he was deployed was almost too much to process. Why didn't we hear about this? The news? The government? Because it was covered up naturally. Can't have the masses panicking about alien invasions. Easier to classify everything and pretend it never happened. Zephyr's tone grew contemptuous. Your aunt spent her remaining years trying to prove that not all of my kind were monsters. She failed, obviously. Marcus studied the dragon's restraints more carefully. The metal bands were inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at directly, and they hummed with the same energy as the containment field. These aren't just to hold you, they're causing you pain. Perceptive. Yes, they are quite unpleasant. Your aunt called them behavior modification devices. I called them torture. Zephyr's head drooped slightly. She believed that if she could reform one alien warrior, she could prove peaceful coexistence was possible. And did she? Reform you, I mean? Zephyr was quiet for a long moment. That depends entirely on your definition of reformed. I no longer wish to conquer your world, if that's what you're asking. But whether that's genuine change or simply exhaustion from years of captivity, even I'm not certain. Marcus limped around the containment field, examining it from all angles. The setup was clearly meant to be permanent. Millicent had built a prison in her basement and kept an alien dragon as her personal research project. It was simultaneously the most humanitarian and most disturbing thing he could imagine. Why did she leave you to me? Because she was dying and needed someone to continue her work. Or perhaps because she knew a soldier would understand the complexities of war and capture better than a civilian. Zephyr's golden eyes tracked Marcus's movement. She spoke of you often. The nephew who fought overseas, who understood duty and sacrifice. I'm not a xenobiologist, I fix motorcycles for a living. But you are a warrior. That may be more relevant than academic credentials. Marcus stopped in front of the control panel. Multiple switches and dials controlled different aspects of the containment system. A thick manual in Millicent's handwriting lay open beside the controls, filled with detailed notes about feeding schedules, behavioral observations, and something called gradual trust-building protocols. What happens if I turn this off? I don't know. It's been so long since I could move freely that I've almost forgotten what it feels like. Zephyr's voice grew softer. Your aunt never had the courage to find out. Marcus stared at the main power switch. Everything in his military training screamed warnings about releasing dangerous prisoners. But something in the dragon's voice, a bone-deep weariness that Marcus recognized from his own dark nights, made him hesitate. "If I release you, will you hurt innocent people? I honestly don't know. 3 years of captivity and conditioning have left me changed. The warrior I was might have said yes without hesitation. The creature I've become isn't certain what he wants anymore." It was, Marcus realized, the most honest answer anyone had ever given him. No false promises or reassurances, just raw uncertainty from a being who had lost everything. "My aunt thought you could be trusted." Your aunt thought many things. She believed in redemption, in the possibility of change, in the fundamental goodness of all sentient beings. Zephyr's laugh was bitter. She was wrong about most things, but perhaps not about everything. Marcus's hand hovered over the power switch. One flick would either prove his aunt's theories, or unleash an alien predator on the world. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like enemy fire. "Tell me about the invasion." "Everything." "Why?" "Because if I'm going to trust you, I need to understand what you were fighting for." Zephyr was quiet for so long that Marcus thought he wouldn't answer. When the dragon finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of accumulated sorrow. "We came because we were ordered to come, because the Empire required new worlds to feed its expansion, because we were soldiers, and soldiers follow orders." Zephyr's eyes closed briefly. "We expected primitive resistance, maybe some crude aircraft and surface weapons. Instead, we found a species that had weaponized their own atmosphere." "What do you mean?" "Your planet's defenders didn't just fight us, they turned your sky itself into a weapon. Every satellite, every piece of orbital debris, every communication relay became a projectile moving at tremendous velocity. It was brilliant, ruthless, and completely unexpected." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. Humans had always been good at improvisation in warfare, at turning everyday objects into weapons. "What happened to the human defenders?" "They died with us. The energy required to weaponize an entire planet's orbital infrastructure burned out every technological system on Earth. Your civilization lost decades of advancement in those 6 hours, which is why you're only now rebuilding to pre-war levels." The pieces began falling into place. The strange gaps in recent history, the way certain technologies seemed to have stagnated, the odd inconsistencies in news reports from 3 years ago. It hadn't been a gradual decline. It had been catastrophic damage, carefully hidden and slowly repaired. How many people died? Millions. On both sides. The humans who died protecting their world, the civilians caught in the crossfire, my own people burned alive in ships they couldn't escape. Zephyr's voice cracked slightly. "War isn't noble, human. It's just death wearing a uniform." Marcus understood that sentiment better than he cared to admit. He'd seen enough combat to know that heroism and horror often lived in the same moment, that the line between defender and destroyer was thinner than most people believed. "Why didn't you die with your ship?" "Cowardice, perhaps, or survival instinct. When the ship was going down, I ejected in an escape pod. I told myself it was tactical thinking, that I could continue the mission on the ground. But I think I was simply afraid to die." The admission hung in the air between them. Marcus recognized the guilt in Zephyr's voice. The survivor's burden that came with living when others didn't. It was a weight he carried himself. Being afraid doesn't make you a coward. Doesn't it? I abandoned my post, my crew, my duty. I chose life over honor. You chose to live when you could have chosen to die. That's not cowardice, that's hope. Zephyr's golden eyes fixed on Marcus with new interest. Your aunt said similar things. Are all human warriors philosophers? Just the ones who've seen enough war to know it's not what the stories say it is. Marcus made his decision. His hand moved to the power switch, but he didn't flip it yet. "If I release you, where will you go?" "I don't know. Your aunt was my only contact with human civilization. Without her protection, I suspect your authorities would prefer me dead rather than free. And if they try to capture you again, then we'll discover whether 3 years of captivity have truly changed me or simply made me a more dangerous predator." Marcus nodded slowly. He understood the stakes, the risks, the very real possibility that he was about to make a catastrophic mistake. But he also understood something else, the corrosive effect of hopelessness, the way prolonged captivity could break even the strongest spirit. "My aunt left me a letter," he said, pulling the envelope from his jacket. "I haven't read it yet. Perhaps you should." Marcus tore open the envelope with hands that only trembled slightly. Millicent's spidery handwriting covered both sides of the paper, and her words made his chest tight with unexpected emotion. The letter spoke of redemption and second chances, of the courage required to trust in the face of fear. It detailed her years with Zephyr, the slow process of communication and understanding, the gradual recognition that intelligence and emotion transcended species barriers. Most importantly, it explained her final request. "She wants me to give you a choice," Marcus said, lowering the letter. "Freedom or continued captivity, but this time willing rather than forced. And if I choose freedom and then prove unworthy of it, then that's on me, not her." Marcus flipped the power switch. The containment field collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. The restraints around Zephyr's limbs deactivated with soft clicks. For the first time in over 3 years, the dragon was free. Zephyr didn't move for several heartbeats. When he finally raised his head, tears glistened in those ancient golden eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, and Marcus heard worlds of gratitude in those 2 simple words. The revelation. 3 weeks after freeing Zephyr, Marcus had developed a routine that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. Every morning he'd brew coffee and heat up whatever synthetic nutrients Millicent had stockpiled for her alien houseguest. The dragon consumed massive quantities of a protein-rich paste that smelled like sulfur and tasted, according to Zephyr, marginally better than starship rations. The basement had been converted into something resembling a living space. Marcus had removed the containment equipment and brought down an old couch, a television, and several space heaters. Zephyr spent most of his time reading Millicent's books or watching human documentaries with intense focus. "Your species is remarkably violent," Zephyr commented one evening as they watched a nature documentary about World War II. "Even your entertainment celebrates warfare." "Says the member of an invasion force," Marcus replied, settling into his chair with a beer. "Touché. Though we at least had the courtesy to keep our wars off-planet. You humans seem to delight in destroying your own habitat." It was conversations like these that made Marcus realize how much he'd come to enjoy the dragon's company. Zephyr was intelligent, surprisingly well-read, and possessed a dry sense of humor that Marcus found oddly comforting. It was like having a roommate who happened to be a 7-foot-tall alien predator with philosophical tendencies. The peaceful routine was shattered on a Tuesday morning when Marcus answered his door to find 3 people in dark suits standing on his porch. "Marcus Chen?" The woman in the center flashed a badge that looked official but didn't belong to any agency Marcus recognized. "Agent Sarah Morrison, Department of Xenological Security. We need to talk." Marcus's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Mr. Chen, we know about your inheritance, we know about your aunt's research, and we definitely know about the Class A hostile entity you're harboring in your basement." Behind him, Marcus heard the subtle sound of claws scraping against concrete. Zephyr was awake and listening. "I think you have the wrong house." Agent Morrison smiled thinly. "Mr. Chen, We have satellite thermal imaging showing a large reptilian heat signature in your basement for the past 3 weeks. We have intercepted communications from your aunt's research logs. We know exactly what you're hiding down there." Marcus stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "What do you want?" "Cooperation. Your aunt's research was valuable, but incomplete. We need to understand the entity's capabilities, its weaknesses, its potential uses for planetary defense." Uses. The second agent, a thin man with cold eyes, spoke for the first time. "The invasion 3 years ago wasn't the last, Mr. Chen. It was reconnaissance. The Empire is coming back, and when they do, we want to be ready." Marcus felt the world tilt around him. "How do you know this?" "Because we've been monitoring their communications since the first invasion. Long-range scanners have detected massive fleet movements in nearby star systems. The Empire lost a reconnaissance force, not their entire military." Agent Morrison stepped closer. "Your aunt believed in rehabilitation. We believe in practical applications. That creature down there is a living database of enemy tactics, technology, and strategic thinking. With the right encouragement, it could help us prepare for the next attack. And if it refuses to cooperate, then it dies, cleanly and quickly, but it dies." The thin agent's voice carried no emotion. "The safety of Earth comes first." Marcus thought about Zephyr in the basement, probably listening to every word through superhuman hearing. The dragon had spent 3 years in captivity, had been slowly healing from physical and psychological wounds. Now the government wanted to turn him into a weapon. "I need time to think about this." "You have 24 hours. After that, we come back with a full tactical team." Agent Morrison handed him a business card. "Make the right choice, Mr. Chen, for everyone's sake." The agents left, and Marcus stood on his porch for several minutes before going back inside. He found Zephyr waiting in the living room, having somehow climbed the basement stairs without making a sound. "How much did you hear?" "All of it. Your government agents aren't particularly subtle." Zephyr settled onto the reinforced floor, his wings folded carefully to avoid knocking over furniture. "They're right about one thing. This isn't over. You know about the Empire's plans? I suspected. The force that attacked your world was too small, too poorly equipped. We were meant to test your defenses, to probe for weaknesses." Zephyr's golden eyes reflected the light from the windows. "The real invasion fleet is probably already in your outer system." Marcus collapsed into his chair, suddenly feeling older than his 32 years. "How much time do we have?" "Days. Weeks at most. Imperial doctrine calls for immediate follow-up once reconnaissance data is analyzed. Then we need to warn people, the military, the government." "Your government already knows. Why do you think they want me alive?" "They're preparing for a war they can't possibly win through conventional means." The weight of the situation pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. Earth was facing an alien invasion. His government wanted to torture information out of his friend, and he was caught in the middle with no good options. "What would they do to you?" "Neural extraction, most likely. They'd hook my brain up to their computers and download everything I know about Imperial technology, tactics, fleet compositions." Zephyr's voice remained steady, but Marcus could see the fear in his eyes. "The process isn't usually survivable for the subject. There has to be another way." "Perhaps, but not one that your authorities would consider." Zephyr moved to the window, peering out at the quiet suburban street. "They see me as a resource to be exploited, not as a potential ally. But you could help them, voluntarily, I mean. Share information willingly instead of having it ripped from your mind." "I could. But they won't trust voluntary cooperation from an enemy combatant. They want guarantees, and the only guarantee they understand is absolute control." Marcus thought about the agents, their cold certainty that violence and domination were the only viable approaches. It was a mindset he'd encountered in the military, the belief that strength and fear were the only currencies that mattered in dealing with enemies. What if we disappeared? Left town? Found somewhere they couldn't track us? They'd find us eventually. And when they did, they'd assume I'd corrupted you, turned you into a collaborator. You'd be branded a traitor to your own species. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's cell phone, buzzing with an urgent news alert. He checked the screen and felt his heart stop. Massive objects detected at the edge of the solar system. NASA confirms unknown vessels approaching Earth. President declares global emergency. Zephyr read the alert over Marcus's shoulder. Faster than I expected. The Empire must have decided your planet was worth immediate conquest rather than prolonged study. Outside, Marcus could hear sirens beginning to wail in the distance. Car doors slammed as neighbors emerged to check their own phones and tablets. The quiet Tuesday morning was transforming into something else entirely. How long until they arrive? At standard Imperial approach speed, 12 to 18 hours for the advanced scouts, 24 to 36 hours for the main fleet. Marcus's military training kicked in automatically. What kind of resistance can Earth mount? Almost none. Your orbital defense network was destroyed in the last battle. Your air forces are designed for atmospheric combat against other human aircraft. Your ground forces lack the mobility to respond to orbital bombardments. Zephyr's assessment was clinically accurate and thoroughly depressing. Then we're finished. Not necessarily. The Empire has one critical weakness. They don't understand human psychology. They expect you to surrender when faced with overwhelming force, to accept conquest rather than choose mutual destruction. But humans don't surrender when the stakes are high enough. Exactly. Your species has a documented history of choosing death over defeat when protecting your territory and families. The Empire doesn't comprehend that kind of irrational courage. Marcus felt a spark of hope. Could we use that somehow? Perhaps. But it would require convincing your leaders to trust an alien enemy with critical strategic decisions. Given what I've observed of human nature, that seems unlikely. The phone buzzed again with another alert. Emergency broadcasts were beginning on all channels, advising civilians to remain calm and await further instructions. Marcus could already see the panic beginning as people realized their comfortable world was about to become a battlefield. The agents will be back soon, Marcus said. They'll want answers before the invasion fleet arrives. Then we need to decide what those answers will be. I can submit to their neural extraction, which might give your forces enough information to mount a meaningful defense. I can refuse and be executed as a security risk. Or what? Or we find a third option that doesn't involve my cooperation with people who view me as a laboratory specimen. Marcus understood the implication. Zephyr was offering to help Earth defend itself, but not through the government's preferred methods of torture and exploitation. The dragon wanted to fight alongside humans, not as their captured asset. You'd really help us? After what we did to you? Your aunt did this to me. Most of your species doesn't even know I exist. Zephyr moved away from the window as more sirens filled the air. Besides, the Empire isn't coming to negotiate. They're coming to strip your planet bare and enslave any survivors. I may be many things, but I'm not willing to facilitate genocide. Even genocide against the species that held you captive? Even then. Captivity taught me many things, but one of the most important was the difference between justice and revenge. Your aunt was wrong about many things, but she was right about the possibility of redemption. Marcus made his decision. Then we don't wait for the agents to come back. We go to them. That seems unwise. They'll simply arrest me and proceed with their original plan. Not if we bring them something more valuable than a prisoner. Such as a volunteer. Someone willing to share information freely and fight alongside human forces against the invasion. Zephyr considered this carefully. You're suggesting I offer myself as an ally rather than submit as a captive. I'm suggesting we give them a choice. They can have a tortured prisoner who might break under neural extraction, or they can have a willing ally who understands both human and imperial tactics. And if they refuse the offer, then we fight anyway, with or without official approval. For the first time since Marcus had known him, Zephyr smiled. It was a terrifying expression on a predator's face, but it carried genuine warmth. Your aunt would have been proud of you, Marcus Chen. Very well, let us go make an offer they'll find difficult to refuse. Marcus gathered his military decorations, his service records, and Millicent's research notes. If they were going to convince a paranoid government agency to trust an alien warrior, they'd need every piece of credibility they could muster. Outside, the sirens grew louder as the world began preparing for war. In less than 36 hours, Earth would face the greatest threat in human history. The only question was whether humanity would face it alone or with the help of an unlikely ally who had every reason to hate them, but chose hope instead. As they prepared to leave, Marcus realized that his quiet life fixing motorcycles was over. He was about to become either humanity's salvation or its greatest traitor, and the margin between those two possibilities was thinner than the edge of a blade. But looking at Zephyr, seeing the determination in those golden eyes, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since Afghanistan, the certainty that he was fighting for something worth the risk. Whether they succeeded or failed, they would face the coming storm as allies, and that made all the difference in the world.